Welcome back to Formula One Bet. My name is Noah Mosley, and thank you so much for watching. If you haven't done so already, please like, comment, and subscribe down below. In this video, we will be previewing the qualifying and the racing odds for the Japanese Grand Prix weekend. So let's go ahead and let's get into it. Now, before we get into the racing odds, I would like to say we might have a fight for the World's Drivers' Championship with the DNF that happened with Max in Australia. Well, looking at the current standings, we see Charles Leclerc is only 4 points behind Max Verstappen, and with Checo being almost 5 points behind. And so I believe that we could see a fight going into this weekend, and Max will definitely have to get his elbows out if he's looking to retain that lead in the championship, and hopefully Red Bull can avoid any reliability issues going into the weekend as well. Next, looking at Yuki Tsunoda, I'm really curious on how he's going to shape up at the end of this race weekend. Simply because he finished in P12 in last year's race, and he was in a significantly less developed car than where he's at now, and I believe he's shown quite a bit of maturity in this past season, and he had a very strong result in Australia, so I believe that that's going to carry over into his home Grand Prix, and he'll produce a pretty good result for RB. Alrighty, looking at Suzuka's international racing circuit, it's composed of 18 corners, and a lot of them are high speed, so I predict a lot of good racing. We saw quite a bit of action in last year's race, and I was pretty satisfied coming out of there, and I believe that in this year's race, we'll see even more action. Australia produced a lot of hype around it, and it was potentially just because of the DNFs of Lewis and Max, but I predict that we'll actually see some pretty good racing here, and a lot of drivers say that this is one of their favorite tracks just because it feels like they're on a roller coaster through the entire lap. And so you want drivers to enjoy the track because they'll feel more comfortable and also want to overtake more. So excited going into this race weekend. Alrighty, and who I have for my shot in the dark to take pole position for the Japanese Grand Prix is Charles Leclerc. Now, Charles is looking at plus 500 odds over on Bet365, and a lot of people may be questioning Charles being my shot in the dark, plus especially with his odds, only plus 500, and essentially I will say that he is in the second best car. However, this is a very tricky circuit, and Charles is known for making mistakes, especially when it comes down to crunch time. And so I don't necessarily think that he could take pole position, but I think that it is possible with the car that he has, and with seeing Carlos's performance in the last race, I think that Charles will definitely want to step up and try to prove himself. And with also looking at that gap with the World's Drivers' Championship only being 4 points behind Max, he can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So I think he'll want to overtake Max in those standings. So hopefully we'll see a good performance out of Charles, but essentially I'm just leaving him as my shot in the dark looking at this weekend. Alrighty, and who I have for my potential lock to take pole position, I have Oscar Piastri. Now, Oscar finished in P2 in qualifying in last year's race. He got himself up to the front row of the grid, and I'm predicting almost an identical performance to what he had last year. He performed very strong at this track, and I think that he has shown even more maturity going into these couple of races. He's shown that he can be one of the top contending drivers and hang with all of the big bucks. And so, I'm predicting that he could take pole position just based upon his performance last year. And let's remember, people, we raced here pretty late in the season, in last season, so it wasn't too far ago, and I don't think that gap between Ferrari and McLaren is that large, and so I think that McLaren could potentially throw it on pole and maybe lock out the second and the third slots there. Alrighty, and who I have for my best bet to take pole position for the Japanese Grand Prix, I have Max Verstappen. Now, Max is sitting at minus 160 odds over on FanDuel, and No surprise here. I think that Max will come out very strong just because of the retirement he had in Australia. And I think that he will be wanting to prove a point to everybody that he is the 3-time returning World Drivers Champion, and he is going to want to cement his time at the top of the leaderboards. Suzuka is a very tricky track as well, and can cause him to get caught up if he is back further in the grid, and could jeopardize his race pace for sure. So I think that Max is going to want to come back strong and put it on pole position, and also he hasn't lost a pole position yet this season. So I would say he is your best bet for pole position in Suzuka. Alrighty, and who I have for my shot in the dark to win the Japanese Grand Prix, I have Carlos Sainz. Now, Carlos is sitting at plus 1,800 odds over on FanDuel, and Carlos just came off of a victory in this last race, and the reason why I have him in my shot in the dark is, yes, he can show that he can beat Max, but I just don't think that this is one of his favorable tracks. Looking at his performance last year, it just wasn't nearly as strong. Now, that could be due to the pace of the car, but I just don't think that this is one of Carlos's strong tracks. And we'll see going into this race weekend if he can carry over the strong performance, and if he is really at one with the car, he could win the race again. And it all is based upon, I believe, Max and where he's at mentally. If he comes back, stronger than ever, like I'm predicting, I just don't see it happening. But with Carlos, I think that he's shown that he can beat Max, and so sky's the limit. So lock him in for your shot in the dark. Alrighty, and who I have for my potential lock to win the Japanese Grand Prix, I have Lando Norris. Now, Lando is sitting at plus 2,800 odds over on FanDuel, and Lando showed a very strong race pace in last year's race, and he even, was on the back of Oscar the entire time, and, McLaren ended up making the decision, and I believe, in that race, that's where we saw Lando get frustrated, as last season, they were letting Lando and Oscar battle it out, race by race, and I think that was the one that they cemented, like, hey, Lando is our number one driver, and so if we're going to have any chance of battling Red Bull for the Constructors' Championship, going into the future seasons, we have to have that clear distinction, and we've seen it so far. In this past season in Australia, we saw it, and I think that we'll see it again, even if Oscar is able to throw it on pole or throw it on P2 and, maintain his race. I just think that, McLaren will make that decision and, give Lando that chance to get his first F1 victory. So I would say he has a very nice car, and they could potentially, develop their car into the race weekend and, have the great setup to give Lando his very first race victory. So go ahead and lock in Lando Norris. Alrighty, and who I have for my best bet to win the Japanese Grand Prix, I have Max Verstappen. Max is sitting at minus 400 odds over on BetMGM, and no surprise here. Just like I said in my qualifying best bet, I think Max is just going to dominate this weekend. I think he's going to want to prove a point to everybody that he is that top driver, and I think that it's going to work identical to last year. He's going to have some issues at the start of the race. He might have to give it his elbows out, get a little dirty, may have to cut somebody off in a corner. But I think as soon as he gets outside of DRS range, it's going to be over, unless, we get a random safety car or a red flag. But with that being said, I just see, Max just, doing his normal performance, and especially coming off of the reliability issue with his rear brake in Australia. So, honestly, he's your best bet for the victory in Japan. So go ahead and lock him in. Alrighty, guys, I'm going to go ahead and throw up the qualifying odds table for you now. And then I'm also going to throw up the racing odds table for you now. just so that way you can put your money on your best driver that you think is going to either take pole position or win the Grand Prix, and put it on the right sports book to win you the most amount of money. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Looking ahead, we have the Japanese Grand Prix recap video coming around Tuesday or Wednesday, so keep an eye out for that. If you haven't done so already, please like, comment, and subscribe down below. But as always, happy racing.